Christian soldiers marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe, forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe, that will not murmur or complain beneath a chastening rod, but in the hour of grief or pain will lean upon its God. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempests rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whatever may come, we'll taste and hear the hallowed bliss of an eternal home. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fitted for the sky, to serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my Master's will. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live, and O thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give. Help me to watch and pray, and on thyself rely. Assured if I my trust betray, I shall forever die. Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God, his kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and end the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to her task, rise up and make her great. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God.
Let's edify.
I don't know why it was like that, but good evening. What's up, by the Saints of the Vessels and Shenanigans? Hello?
How's it going, CJ?
It goes good.
Where does it go? By the way,
Uh,
where did you guys get to last week?
Nowhere. Slacked,
Oh,
we just slacked off and sang. So,
so we then left off at what, verse 12?
uh,
You guys didn't proceed off in beyond the
no,
council.
um, no, we were both woke that night, so we decided let's just sing. Neither
All
one
right.
of neither one of us have the mental capacity to teach a class. So, uh, sorry about that.
Well, I guess that makes it an easy review for you once we get people in here.
Is there any taggers? I didn't tag because, see, I was gonna tag, but I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, man.
No, Ez is outside working on a task because he's not going to be around for me to work for tomorrow. So he's working for other people. And Alicia is out playing with her sister, so, and
Well,
helping her mother tame a kitten.
well, if I would have known that, we would have had tagging done.
Are you two headed to town, Chef? Okay.
Anything interesting happened today for you, Levi?
Well, we had quite a fun day of merry-go-round at the school today. Hello, Reba. Yeah, that was quite funny. Today was the first day of Boys and Girls Club being open for the school year, because normally the very first week of school it is closed with the staff having, most of the staff are adjusting to the school life because they're part timers who are students. Okay, so they're getting back into the school of things, and the director, of course, is taking a vacation. So they close for that first week of school, which is basically 3 days of school. Now, so then the first full week of school, they reopen, and that was today. So we begin. My bus goes from maybe 20, 22 kids in the morning to approximately 40 kids in the afternoon.
Well,
So it doubles, maybe a little over doubled in size. And of course, that means all the other routes are adjusting to the loss of those kids and trying to figure out where everybody else is going. Okay, so they're trying to make sure everybody's getting on the right bus, and teachers are trying to adjust to that, trying to figure out, okay, are these kids supposed to go on the Boys and Girls Club bus, or which bus are they supposed to go on? So, of course, there's a lot of radio chatter. Hey, I'm missing this kid, or I'm missing that kid. I need this kid. This brother is saying that sister's supposed to be on this bus. All that type of thing going on. So there was a lot of merry-go-round there. We finally get that straightened out. I think one bus was missing one kid, and I had a kid that wasn't supposed to be on that bus. That they had told me the wrong name. The kid's name was wrong. It was close. They both started with an A. But anyway, so we get that straightened out. We get ready to head out. I'm going over bus rules, and I forget to take the parking brake off the bus.
Oh, no.
So that took me a little minute to figure out, okay, now why is my bus not going forward? I get that figured out. Now the way it is, I'm bus D. And we have eliminated bus C. So bus B pulls off to the side because he has 2 stops before town, and I have no stops before town. But rather than move me up to bus B position and confuse all the teachers and students, they leave me in bus B. Or bus D, rather, as in dog. So he pulls off to the side, lets me pass, right? Well, I get turned the corner. I'm headed to town. I'm about a mile away from the school, and all of a sudden he comes on the thing, says, "Don't ask me why I'm going the wrong direction. I'm supposed to be going." He turned totally the wrong direction. Because last year, and by the way, this is our director of transportation who's driving this particular route. But he's so used to driving that route, the route that goes the other direction, that out of habit, he had turned left instead of turning right. But so it was a merry-go-round of a day, and I even had another snafu on my bus because I drop all the kids off at Boys and Girls Club that are supposed to go to the Boys and Girls Club, and I get headed out of town, and the head pops up, and I'm like, "What in the world are you doing on the bus? You're supposed to go to Boys and Girls Club." She says, "No, I'm not. I'm supposed to go to the gas station where her mother works." Oh, okay. So I went and dropped my next drop off, turned around, went back to town, dropped her off. I went back out of town. So it was quite the merry-go-round of a day.
Oh.
It's quite interesting, yes, and it's no wonder I have a headache, right?
Yeah, yeah, man. Well, I would love to be in your bus. I think that would be really fun.
You'd think so, but I'm a mean old bus driver. Reba said, "I see Jay and Levi." Hey, Reba. What? Oh, that's right.
Oh.
I really am pretty stringent on 5 rules. Use your quiet voices. After all, I do not need to hear, kindergarten voices, or not kindergarten, but the 2nd grade voices clear up at the front of the bus. Now, my bus is situated, the way I've organized my bus is I've got preschool. Each one has their own seat, or each row of seats, I should say. So preschool has the 1st row of seats. 2nd row is kindergarten. 3rd row is 1st grade. 4th row is 2nd grade. By the time you get to the 2nd grade in the 4th row, I should not be hearing your voice. I mean, I should hear that I can be hearing that you're speaking, but not what you are speaking, if you catch my drift. If I am hearing your voice over 3 rows of other chatter, what does that mean for you? That means you're speaking in a not so quiet voice.
Yeah. And it gets loud.
Now, if I am hearing 6th grade over all the preceding voices, what do you think 6th grade is doing?
Talking too loud. That's when you're like, 6th graders, shut up.
I've had to do that. And then you wonder why my voice is kind of raggedy. But thankfully, last year, they fixed my PA system. So I have a PA system in the bus, and I can use it. Well, I was going over the rules, and my preschoolers were still talking. And I had told them politely twice, hey, if I'm talking, you are not. And I know their teacher had been reinforcing this type of a rule, of a behavior, as in if I'm talking, you're not, zip it, type of a situation. So I finally turned around and looked at this loudmouth little preschooler behind me, and I am still on this PA system, and I told him, I barked at him. And I'm like, hey, I believe I told you that if I'm talking, you are not. In a very firm voice. Now, what would you do if you heard that tone of voice coming from me?
I would shut up.
Oh boy, did he ever. Because not only do you hear that tone, but it's coming over the PA system, so it's amplified. And everyone in the bus is hearing that tone of voice.
Silent.
So it got quiet, and I was able to finish out the rest of the going over the rules. So, and for the most part, the ride was pretty. I mean, I don't really keep it down. They have voice volumes, 1 through like 4. 1 is a very quiet inside voice, and 4 is like a yelling, screaming. I tend to let them go up to like between a 2 and a 3. But if they get much louder than a 3, that's when I tell them to simmer down, quiet it down, because it really bothers me. I'm trying to drive the bus. But then, there's the second rule is you stay in your seats at all times. And that means there's no moving about the bus while the bus is in motion. If we're on a trip, on a school trip, like a class trip, field trip, or I'll actually go through a whole entire spiel where I say, there is no moving about the bus while the bus is in motion, except for your chaperones or teachers. I said, and if you see me moving about the bus while the bus is in motion, we're in trouble. That gets a few chuckles, especially from the parents, kind of nervously. And I tell them, I said, that means your feet are not supposed to be in between these 2 silver lines that run the length of the bus. I said, you see those 2 silver lines? I point them out. I said, if your feet are in between those 2 silver lines, then you're in my aisle. Get out of my aisle. And of course, we had students demonstrating what was in the aisle, and every time I mention them, of course, they get their feet out of the aisle. I'd say, okay, so and so is demonstrating what it means, what it looks like if your feet are in the aisle, and immediately they move their feet out of the aisle. But then I said, and then you keep your hands and feet to yourself. Field trip mode says, after all, so and so doesn't want you picking their nose with your toes. Although such and such has volunteered to eat them. Or put them in their collection, whichever way. And that the kids just absolutely go nuts over. The girls are all like, eh, and the boys are like laughing. So, and then the final rule, of course, mainly the final rule is no eating or drinking allowed on the bus, because we do not allow eating or drinking on the bus. We have no trash cans.
That was my biggest favorite rule, because I was always starving.
Well, we have a big problem where they have, for example, kids who they'll send, the poor kids' lunches home. For example, okay, you're going to go home for the weekend, and they'll send a lunch for each day of the weekend with you. those lunches never make it home. The kids get into them and eat them right there on the bus, and all the wrappers and crumbs are on the bus. And who's responsible for cleaning it up?
You.
Right. And the school mandated the policy. No eating or drinking on the bus. Now, if you're on a sports trip, you are able to drink, but you're not able to eat. And that's because of the crumbs, because of stickiness and things like that. If you get the floor on the bus wet, you actually begin to rot the bus, because the floors are actually made of a plywood type of an underformer. And so, yes, there is still the metal type, but then there's also the plywood on that as well, on top of that as well. So there's a metal to protect the flooring from the elements, from the ice and the salt and stuff like that. But there's also a plywood sheeting on top of that for people to walk on, to protect the metal from people's salt and stuff that they're dragging on the bus from above. And so while we clean the bus every day after the end of the first route, we go through and we sweep our buses out. This cuts down on the amount of trash that we have to deal with. And it cuts down on the amount of mopping that we have to deal with, because we don't have to mop the bus as a result of people not eating on the bus or drinking on the bus. Finally, then we talk about respecting the driver or your chaperones if you're on your trip. And we say, well, that means doing what you're told when you're told to do it. Because our goal is to get you safely from point A to point B. And so if I'm trying to drive and you distract me, what's going to happen to the bus? And we try to make it very clear that if you distract the driver, the bus is going to go either into the ditch or ram into the back of somebody else, or have somebody ram into the back of it, because the driver is distracted and not paying attention to what's going on. And so they're not going to be able to maintain your safety. And you're going to pop that. And you do that, and you're going to have to clean up the mess that results. It stinks, it's glittery, and you will not like it. You understand? Don't do it. Now, is anybody on tech? Probably not. Guess what? You're elected.
I got the Bible up. If we get
to it,
if we get the Acts today.
So that's I went over those because it's important to start the year out correct with the kids understanding the rules, and then I'll go through every so often reinforce those rules. I actually reinforce the rules as we go through. That way, the kids, especially the youngest ones, will have them ingrained in them, and the older ones will have it reaffirmed. And you know what? I'll give you a picture of what happened, or what happened to me at the staff meeting. I walk into the school up here, into the cafeteria area where all the staff were meeting for breakfast, and over here in this corner is the other schools, because we're two schools. There's the AC where I work, and then there's the GC the building that we're in. And the GC bus driving staff are over here. I may walk over and I sit down with them, and I'm talking with them. And my friend from the GC, who I've done several field trips with, turns to his partners, who I don't know because they're new, and he says, "This is Levi. He is a legend in this area as a bus driver because he has one of the best, how did he put it, organized buses or controlled buses. He says, I've been trying to pattern my bus after his. He says, and this guy's been driving. Well, I guess he's not been driving quite as long as I have, but uh, it seems like he has, but he hasn't. And it's like, well, thank you, Paul. So Reba says, my day started out great because of the wonderful Devo this morning. It was a pretty somber day, though, because almost 13 years ago, my granddaughter passed away. Her birthday was today, and it still hurts so bad. She was 9 years old. Oh, I'm sorry, sister. It really is hard for me to say that. Not say that, but hard for me to, how do I want to put it? It's hard for me now to say anything because today is Shua's birthday, and she is 9 today. And so I know that brings you pain. But I hope, my dear sister, that you look upon my daughter as a granddaughter, because we view you as one of our dear family. And I know that if you were here, that you would be treated not just as my sister in Christ, but as a grandmother to these kids. We love you. And it was a great devotion this morning.
It was. I feel like
No, we're not going to do ring out.
I feel like we got 30 minutes left already.
Let's do the rap and let's get into it. I'm not going to be able to sing too much because I did all the singing earlier.
Okay, I was going to say, let's choke it and sing, but okay.
No, we've been gone 2 weeks now from our text.
So, Acts 23, we'll see what we can get done with what we got left in our hour here. Acts 23, Paul is before the council and he has said, I've lived in good conscience toward God in all my life, and the high priest threatened to strike him, and Paul calls him out on it, and Paul gets rebuked because Paul didn't know he was the high priest. One possibility is, well, a major probability is he's been gone for several years. He didn't know this guy. And two, he wasn't really acting like a good high priest, granted, in Paul's defense, but he apologized. Verse 6, wait a minute. Verse 5, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. And he quotes from a passage in Exodus 20, in Leviticus 5, where it says, you shall not revile the high priest. And so he realizes that the room is full of...
I had that down as Exodus 22.
Okay, maybe that's...
Exodus 22:28.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, Exodus 22. I looked at the wrong cross reference. Thank you. See, that's why there's two of us here. And so he recognizes, wait a minute, that there's Pharisees and Sadducees here, and I'm going to turn the heat off of me and off of and really pits the Pharisees and Sadducees against one another by mentioning that he is on trial because of the resurrection. Well, uh, that totally starts a feud between the Pharisees and Sadducees because the Sadducees didn't believe in anything supernatural, where the Pharisees did. And so while they're arguing, they're fighting over Paul, about to tear him to pieces. Verse 10, the commander uh, yanks Paul out of there and brought him into the barracks. And that's where we left Paul last time. He's evaded being ripped to shreds by, by this argument, and now he's in the barracks.
Um, it's interesting when you say that they don't believe in anything supernatural. Yet I wonder how they ever accounted for God.
Well, I guess.
No, I mean, you're right, because it says there they do not believe in that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but yet Jesus said God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So if they don't believe in a spirit, how do they account for God? The very God that they worship, I am the Lord, I
Right.
exist, God. And how do they account for him if they don't believe in him?
And to be fair, the text doesn't explicitly say they don't believe in anything supernatural, but I guess they don't believe in anything else supernatural than God. I don't know how they would account for him. Uh, Interesting.
What we have here, another interesting point. You left him off in verse 10. Is that where we left off?
Uh, yes, I think so.
In verse 11, we're going to pick up in 11. We're going to run through.
22?
Yes.
Not saying we'll get all the way down there,
I'll
but
do my best. Let's go ahead and go.
alright. On the following night, the Lord stood by him and said, sorry, I said,
You sure you don't want to listen to bring that up while you read?
she is still in Proverbs 19. And the night following, this is the KJV, the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and others and said, we bound ourselves under a curse that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down to you tomorrow, as though ye would inquire something more perfectly concerning him, and we wherever he comes near are ready to kill him. And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul said, then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. So they took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who has something to say unto thee. Then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, What is it that thou hast to tell me? And he said, The Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring down Paul to tomorrow into the council, though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart and charged him, See thou tell no man, thou hast said these things to me.
To the YouTube person whose name I cannot pronounce, please do not spam the channel. But hello, glad to have you with us. Okay, so as we read through Acts chapter 23, 11 through 22, we begin by seeing that the Lord's standing by Paul. And this is the second time, or the third time rather, that Christ has appeared unto Paul.
Yeah, that's right.
What do I mean by that? Well, the first time we obviously have Paul, Christ appearing unto Paul on the road to Damascus.
Right.
And then we have him, he spoke to Paul, but he says here as well in just in chapter 22, he recounts this second time in verse 18, 17 and 18. He's in Jerusalem. Acts 22, verses 17 and 18.
Yeah, I was trying to find that. I knew where you were going. I'm like, well, where's the second time there?
Now, it happened when I returned to Jerusalem, was praying in the temple, that I was in a trance and saw him saying to me, Make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed in thee. That's verse 19, 20. Let's see, 20. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, consenting to his death and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him. Then he said to me, Depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles. So this is the second time that Jesus had appeared to Paul. And then here is the third time that we have recorded for us. Now, were there more times? Might be, but we have this. This is the third time that was recorded to us that he appears to Paul, and this time he says, "Be of good cheer, for as you have testified of me in Jerusalem, so now you must bear witness of me also to Rome." So Paul knows that he now has God's approval.
we're
of his
back.
witness.
Well, sorry, we're back in 23. It was
Yeah,
verse
23 verse 11.
11.
Thank you. So now we have him for the third time standing here talking to Paul, and this time he says, "You now have my authority to go to Rome. You have my, be of good cheer. Don't worry about what they're going to do." Um, and it's a big comfort to Paul. It's a big comfort because here he is bound in the castle, or here he is imprisoned in the castle. He has been almost torn apart by a mob, and twice almost. They feared for his safety, so they hustled him up the stairs that first time. And then he was before this council and almost torn asunder again by the Sadducees and Pharisees. So, and Jesus says, "Be of comfort, good cheer."
What in the world?
What?
I just killed a bug.
You bug murderer, you. What did the
Well,
Volkswagen do to you?
nothing. I was
So
just,
why did you kill it?
I didn't even know it was on my hand. I felt something squish, and I'm like, oh, there's a bug. Derail.
So, so in verses 12 through 12 through 15, what we have is the plot. It thickens.
Yep.
Okay. We have here, initially what happened is Paul comes to Jerusalem, and these bunch of Jews from Asia see him, and they see him in the company of one Greek, and they believe they brought him in, that he brought this Greek into the temple. And so
Right.
they instituted a riot. Okay. That's what brought about Paul's imprisonment. Then they have Paul brought before the council, and that ends up in a riot between the Jews and between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Well, now what we have is 40 people who have decided that they hate Paul so much that they're going to bind themselves together under an oath. And this oath, verse 12, Alicia, this oath is so severe that they're not going to eat or drink. This is the oath. They're not going to eat or drink until they kill Paul. If they do eat or drink, their oath stipulates that they must suffer the most severe punishment possible. A curse is what it's called. For in verse 13, 12. Let me go back to 12. Okay, the New King James says an oath, saying they would not. The King James says a curse. The word used here for oath is anathematio, or themazo. And do you know what that it comes from? Do you know what word it comes from?
Anathema, right?
Anathema. You're familiar with that word because of
Galatians 1.
Galatians 1. Do you know what the word anathemazo, anathemazo, I can't even hardly pronounce it tonight. Anathemazo is, what it means?
Please tell us.
Well, if Alicia will take us to that particular word in the King James Plus, if she highlights number 13, she'd be there quicker. But anyway, okay. So look at the word curse there. That would be G332, which incidentally comes from G331.
After
Yeah.
the word curse.
Up one line, Alicia. Over. There you are. To declare or vow under penalty of execration. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What does execration mean? Well, let's go to Thayer's. And we'll see what execration means.
I know what excrement is.
It might be considered. Let's go to Thayer's, Alicia. There you go.
Sorry, I
To
know.
devote
I
to destruction.
know.
To devote to destruction, to declare oneself liable to the severest divine penalties. What's the severest divine penalty?
Well, I would say spiritual death.
Remember Jesus' own words that said, "Do not fear them which can kill the body, but fear him that can do what?
Kill the soul in hell.
Destroy both the body and soul in hell."
You know, it's interesting. It's almost like that they say, we don't get Paul, may we go to hell.
That's literally
What
they're saying. Why would you do that? We're not going to eat until we kill Paul, and if we do, may we go to hell. That's what they were saying. That's what they're binding themselves to. Now, you mentioned that we mentioned that it comes from anathema.
Right.
What do you think that means then?
Cursed someone who, like in the context of Galatians 1, it would be whoever's preaching a different gospel, literally, let them go to hell.
I'm not 100% certain, but I believe the phrase would be essentially let them die the death.
Right.
If we go to G331, it means, and I think, Alicia, would you go to G332, go back to Strong's?
And do you see the other link there, G331? Yeah, that one.
Right click on it. And the first option right there at the top, look up. There you go. A religious ban, or concretely excommunicated. To excommunicate means to completely sever from the grace of God.
Right.
Now, think about that. When you think about that, think about that when you think of Galatians 1, verse 6 through 9. Thayer shows us in regard to anathema, it was a thing set up or laid by in order to be kept. Specifically, it was an offering resulting from a vow, which after being consecrated to a god, was hung upon the walls or columns of the temple or put in some other conspicuous place. It was a thing devoted to God without hope of being redeemed. And if an animal to be slain. Therefore, a person or thing doomed to destruction without hope.
That's some strong language in Galatians 1, isn't it?
And as you read through these options of Thayers, it's a man accursed or devoted to the direst of woes, to die without hope, to, you know, that to me is so painful, so that to me is Judas. That embodies Judas completely.
Absolutely.
So we look at that, and um, we realize, anathematio or anathemazo is used 4 times in the entire Bible. Guess what 4 times it's where it's used at 4 times?
Is it right here in the book of Acts?
3 times it's used in the book of Acts.
Okay.
Would you like to know where the 4th one is?
If I would guess, would be oh, is it the passage where he says, "I wish I was a stranger in Christ or a Christian in Christ"?
Nope.
No. Okay.
And by the way, the 3 times in the book of Acts, it's right here in this chapter.
Interesting.
But the 4th time is actually in Mark chapter 14, verse 71. But he began to anathemazo and swear, saying, I know not this man of whom you speak. Peter was calling down the direst of woes. Whether it was upon himself or upon those around that was listening to him, he was cursing. He was calling down that direst of woes when he betrayed Christ.
That's, wow.
Yeah. Okay. So that was just a little side note that perhaps brought in some interesting or clarity to this particular group. They had bound themselves to this direst of woe in their conspiracy. And to accomplish their conspiracy, what they do is they approach the elders, the chief priest, and they said, we've bound ourselves under this curse. You can go back to the NKJV or the KJV, Alicia, to this verse 14. So we've bound ourselves there. Now, what we want you to do, because we think we're doing this noble, great deed, and we think you'll approve, what we want you to do is have this Roman to bring Paul as if you need to question him again. Verse 15, now therefore ye with the council, you therefore together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiry concerning him. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near. So we're going to ambush these guys, and we're going to kill him before he ever comes near. Understand another point about the Jewish culture. They were experts at guerrilla warfare. What do I mean by that? The zealots were such as they would appear in a mob. They would walk up right in the mob and stab a Roman official right in the back, and and then they would disappear. Nobody would be the wiser as to who had done it. They'd be gone. So imagine 40 people suddenly mobbing a few Roman soldiers. Because what suspicion would the centurion have that Paul was going to be attacked? He might have 2 soldiers with Paul to bring him down. A full band, probably not, but couple soldiers. And here you have 40. Even if he had 10 Roman soldiers, you have 40 Jews prepared to mob these people and wipe out the squadron, if you will, if need be. But they were going to kill Paul no matter what.
It seems like when Paul's before one of the governors, and he is going to be sent back to Jerusalem, a similar thing happens where the Jews plot to destroy him again in Acts chapter 25 to 26. Do you know what I'm talking about?
What they were doing in 25 to 26 is going to have him brought up and then try to kill him there.
Right.
And that means. But that's when Paul says he got tired of this. He's like, no, you're not going to keep jerking me around on this chain. I am before Caesar's judgment seat, so I'm a Roman citizen. I appeal to Caesar. And so, yeah, they were going to. Now, whether any of these 40 people were still alive by that time.
That's what I was gonna bring up. I mean, either they were cursed or they died.
Well, we know how. I hate to say this, but it is the truth. We know how stiff-necked and how much the Jews were, and how much of a group of covenant breakers they were.
Yeah.
So what are we left to assume?
They probably just broke their covenant.
More than likely.
Yeah.
There might have been a few that actually remained true to their covenant. But anyway, so let's continue on. And by the way, well, we'll have to get to that bridge when we get there. When Paul's sister, now Paul had a sister. Imagine that. We kind of think, at times we kind of get this idea that Paul was a child, but he wasn't.
But
Paul had a family. He had a mother, he had a father. And obviously he had a sister. Did he have any of those siblings? We're never told, but he did have a sister. And her son, his nephew, heard of their conspiracy. And what did he do? Well, he came and visited Paul. What a nice nephew.
yeah.
Right? I would love to have a nephew that if I was in trouble like this, that nephew would come and warn me of such an event, because this nephew did. He comes to Paul and visits him. Now, a lot of times, if you are a prisoner in this Roman era, you didn't get visitors unless you had the mullah, or they did. And this is evident throughout the imprisonment of Paul. For example, one of the governors was a Felix, or was it Festus, that kept him in prison, hoping for more money. It was Felix. And they didn't get it. So, it was not uncommon for those who did not have money to not have visitors. It was also not uncommon for those who did not have money to not see the light of day either.
Right.
So he comes and he tells Paul, verse 16, verse 17. Paul hears it and he calls one of the centurions and he says, "Hey, bring this young man to the chief captain, for he has something to say." Now, how many times do we hear of a conspiracy and the first thing we want to do is blab it to everybody? It's not a wise thing to have loose lips. As the old Navy saying says, loose lips sink ships. Because if you begin to tell people what your business is, especially in those days of, a lovely sailing ships, the pirates were going to catch wind of when you were going to sail with your lovely laden cargo of rich silks and other mercantile goods, and would be after you and lay wait to entrap you and take a hold of those goods. And that's what they did. But so Paul does not reveal what his nephew has to say to the young commander or to the commander. He simply says, "Hey, this guy has a message from me to the commander. He has something to tell him. Take him there." Now, as a Roman citizen, he is accorded certain rights and respect.
Right.
Remember that as soon as Lysias found out that Paul was a Roman citizen by birth, he's like, "Nope, I'm not going to touch you. Don't touch him." I mean, everybody stood away. We're not going to touch this guy. And so the centurion takes the nephew to the chief captain and informs him that Paul had sent this young man to the chief captain. And the chief captain then goes aside. Notice he takes him by the hand. What does that signify to you in verse 19?
Well, possibly, uh, this nephew is young. Uh, if you couple that with what Paul says to the centurion in 17, take this young man to the commander.
I
And
was going to say that was a no-brainer, CJ, because Paul already called him young.
Right. Is that what you're looking for, or are you after something else?
Well, the thing of it is do you take a 20-something-year-old man by the hand and walk him aside?
No.
No. Would you take a 15-year-old man by the hand and walk him aside? Or a boy, I should say. 15-year-old.
Not even that.
You would perhaps take about a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't take a 15-year-old because, that would be kind of ridiculous. You would ask him to come aside. You might grab his sleeve and say, "Come over here." But the centurion takes him by the hand and goes aside privately. So that this to me, would you suspect a child of listening in on your conversation? Or would you be more prone to be watchful for a 15 to 25-year-old? Would you guard your lips if there's a 8 to 12-year-old more, or would you guard your lips more if there was a, let's say, 15 to 25-year-old?
In regards to what? What?
If you were in this conspiracy, if you were wanting to tell your friend something that might be compromising?
Probably, probably guard your mouth in the presence of young ones.
Most people don't see children. Some of the best spies are children. Why? Because they're everywhere. Nobody suspects children.
Right,
When you're conversing, you don't suspect that child over there is actually listening to you. He's playing with his toys,
right.
or he's out on a mission for something, or maybe he's a beggar. You
So
don't see children.
I guess the answer would be that you would you would really guard the message if it's a 15 to 20-year-old.
But if you see a 20-year-old, for example, walking towards you, you would not be speaking. You would quiet down or find some other switch topics, right?
Right.
Um,
So,
so I use that to illustrate this. This is not an adult. This is
right,
while it says it's a young man, um, this is not someone who is accorded the adulthood level. And what was adulthood under the Mosaical law? Do you remember?
20 years old and upwards, right?
Right. 20
That's
years old and upward was considered active service for military. It was also active service for I think it was 25 and upward for active military. It's 20 or 25. Yeah, I know it was 20 years, or it was 30 years and upward, 30 to 50 for carrying loads in the temple. But I think it was 20 and upward for military service.
right.
And the interesting thing is the word neanias for young man means youth, and it can mean up to 40 years old.
Well, I think from the context, it's clear that this isn't a
This
40
is not a 40-year-old man.
being taken by the hand. And it's almost like you see the commander taking the chop out of the hand and like bending over and saying, "Now, what did he want me to? What did he want to talk to me about? You know how you lean over? That's not in the text, but that's what that sounds like. What is it, young boy? You
Well,
know,
and they didn't. I mean, that's a very good point. Is it gives you that impression of the Roman centurion looking at maybe a 12-year-old, or definitely a young man, someone you would grab by the hand and lead them aside, and kind of a fatherly figure of a centurion, not someone who's going to be immediately suspicious of, or rough towards, like a 15-year-old or a youth that is beginning, who has an attitude, a teenager.
right.
Not every teenager has an attitude. I'm not trying to say that. And nor is every 12-year-old perfect like the little. But
No, you didn't.
you're right, I didn't. And
That one flew by his head.
it did not. I ignored it. I caught it. That's why I said no, I didn't. So Notice the report that this nephew gives, 20 through 22, or 20 through 20, 20 and 21. He's very specific, isn't he?
This
And
young
this young man was in the presence when the meeting between the chief priests and elders was called with the 40 men. That's another thing to point out. He didn't hear the initial plot. He heard the conspiracy between the 40 men, or the leaders of it, and the elders and chief priests, as we see in verse 14.
right.
Now, in verse 20, he says, this is what the young man says. The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. Man, this kid is spot on. He is very clear and concise. You could not ask for a better report unless you wanted to ask all the particulars. Who was there? How many? What was their names? What did they look like? And the way this kid conducts himself, he almost could do it. Verse 21. Because look at this. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him. Men who have bound themselves by an oath, a curse, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you. Oh, and when. Yes, O'Shea, don't forget the when. Clear, concise report. Dude, any spy organization would love to have this little kid among their ranks.
Seriously. Don't underestimate children.
Absolutely not. In our family, we have a saying, little pitchers have big ears, or big handles, rather. Little pitchers have big handles, which means children have big ears. And they'll soak in whatever they hear. And I can tell you for a fact, we were good at looking as if we didn't listen, but we listened hard.
I wonder if this little boy, we don't know, but gives this funny feeling that he didn't wait around and tell his mom about this. He just ran in and told Paul.
Well, I don't think he. I do think you're right. I don't think he waited around, but I don't think he made it obvious that he was headed in to see Paul.
Hey, Mom, I'm going to.
No, it wasn't as if, hey, look at me, I'm running to the centurion. O'Shea said, Amos and I perfected that technique a long time ago. Oh, you only think you did. Or you did when, in regards to your mother, perhaps.
Yeah, they would tell us. Granted, I grew up half of my family non-Christian, so I got put your earmuffs on and of course we were like, go like this. And just hear everything. We would act like we're covering our ears. We really are. I mean, that's how kids are, you know.
Yeah, you send them out. And then we were going to finish up with verse 22. So the chief captain then lets the young man depart, and he charges him, do not tell anyone what you have showed, that you have showed these things to me. Why is that? Very obvious. If the young man opened his mouth and let them know that, hey, I told Lysias this. I told this, if he tried to boast and vaunt himself up, what was going to happen to him?
He's probably gonna be next.
He's going to disappear.
Yeah.
If these men were such as were willing to go without eating, bind themselves under a curse to kill Paul, what would they do to the man, to the young one who actually opened his mouth and told on them?
What's the saying? I've heard this so many times from my sister. Snitches get what?
Stitches?
Stitches. Uh, because I was the snitch of the family, and when I would snitch, she would yell, "Hey, snitches get stitches, come here."
And then she'd tickle you, and you got a stitch in your side. Yep. So we're going to end there tonight with that aspect. We're going to leave you on a cliffhanger as to what happens. If you want to read more, then go right ahead. We encourage that. But the thing of it is, we leave Paul here still in prison. We leave 40 men on death's doorstep. They're still bound by a curse, not eating or drinking. Man, they're old. They're wasted away, but they're old. They're nothing but skin and bones. And we have a young man that went into hiding because and at least kept his mouth shut, but was the perfect spy because nobody's seen him since. So we have any other comments on this passage, TJ?
Well, we didn't say a lot about this young man, but the connection of what the Bible says about youth. For God in your youth, Ecclesiastes 12, 1 Timothy 4, let no one despise your youth. Granted, those are written to not little kids, but I think the principle applies. I mean, a lot of the heroes of the Bible are young people. Like Joseph was 17 years old.
Yep.
Uh,
Joseph was 17. David was a ruddy youth, but we know he was old enough to go to war because he was
right.
a man of war. So
Yeah.
that he was at least 20 years old. People think of him as a little shepherd boy, as a little 8 or 9 or 12-year-old. No, he was not. But he was a young man.
And
Go ahead.
King Josiah was like 8, wasn't he?
Josiah was 8. There was a 7-year-old. What was it? Joash was 7.
Oh man.
12.
I mean, that just breaks my mind. Imagine being ruled by an 8-year-old kid. Which obviously, if they were just a lackey, of course.
O'Shea said, perfected that enough as far as we needed it. That's true. And then he says, for today, until next time, we leave our hero ensnared in the prisons of the enemy, being pursued by a band of relentless, cursed old people that have been told on.
Oh, you need to go into voiceovers. That would be great for the end of the episode. Well,
Right. And we could do two things here. And first off, another couple of points that we could have brought out. The one with yours, the ruler Lysias, the chief captain, he did not despise the young man's youth.
right.
He listened intently and he took heed. The second thing is that what did he do? He took him aside. What should we do? We need to take people aside. If we have a report of something, let's take people aside, not blare it to everybody. Let's not blast it.
That connects back to chapter 18, right? With who sounded cool in the palace. What did they do?
They took
They
him aside.
took him inside.
Yeah.
So,
So,
uh,
all right.
good points.
Okay. So until next time, then.
Yes, I think we can finish this chapter next week.
Well,
We
Lord
have,
willing, we'll be able to do that anyway.
we have a letter to go through the Felix, and
Join us next time when we will hear him say, "Stay here till I will hear thee."
I invite you to his eternal plan tomorrow night. Our Bible class, we will be talking about how should Christians respond to suffering. By the way, this will really be our last actual class covering new material because next week we're gonna play a review game. So, we'll talk a little bit about suffering tomorrow night. I hope you can join me there. I've enjoyed that study of his eternal plan. But you got any announcements on your part before I close this out? Do I little spiel?
Not yet.
Okay. Thank you so much, and remember at CEM we want to do three things. We have an agenda, but it's not hidden. Here's our agenda. We want to glorify God,
Amen.
edify you,
Amen.
and answer any spiritual questions you may
That way, we can hopefully draw you closer to God. And that way as well, that whether we wake tomorrow to serve Him here on this earth, or we wake to serve Him up there tomorrow in heaven, where we all long to be, you know where we'll be, because we'll see you then. God bless.
have.